This is Mommying While Muslim, recorded live and unedited. Watch as Zeba and Uzma record their podcast, see their reactions, and find out for yourself what all the buzz is about.
This episode is sponsored by Guidance Residential. Join Guidance Residential this November 9th for their consumer webinar, The Benefits of Islamic Home Financing, where you can find out best practices and tips on how to make the home buying experience smooth and easy for you and your community. Topics covered include the benefits of homeownership, understanding riba and today's lending practices, the differences between the Sharia way and the conventional way, how to prepare your finances and mistakes to avoid, what to expect during the home buying and searching process, and Q&A for the first-time home buyer. Share this event with your networks and register for limited seats at www.guidanceresidential.com. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mommyingwhilemuslim podcast. This is Uzma Jaffrey.
And this is Zeba Hassan. We were just talking right before we started recording because I am going West Coast in a couple of weeks. Yay! And I get to see my beautiful co-host and apparently bring my entire, when I say entire,
she means entire,
my entire family. So
yes. I'm
like, Uzma, the Hassans are stampeding your house come December. We're moving. We're in that mode right now and planning. So poor Uzma has to entertain a lot of us. But we're just excited for the kids to finally get to meet.
Yes,
IRL.
Exactly. I wish I could say that my kids were like super social and awesome, but it turns out
mine are not. Mine are so awkward. It's okay.
It turns out they're not, and so that's all right. But 25 people does not scare me at all because that's probably a fraction of what I have over when we have parties. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, Uzma's a party girl. See, I'm like the by myself person. So like if anybody comes over, like thank God she's who she is, because I have to say I'm like I hide in the corner.
So if 25 of the Joffreys showed up to your house, you would freak out?
I wouldn't freak out, but I have to say I wouldn't freak out because I love you guys. Yeah. So that's a different story. But I do have to say I have to put on my alter ego. Like everybody knows I have an alter ego to come in front of people, and that alter ego gets tired and has to go into hiding, reboot, and come back out. But Uzma, her alter ego and her regular ego are exactly the same person.
Crack fiends. So.
Well, I don't know if you're a crack fiend, but I'm super excited. So that's going to be that's my December, and I get to have my boy home for a month.
That's right.
Which is very, very exciting. Mm-hmm. I'm very, very excited about that. So, Uzma, like, what's going on with you? I know we're talking about you doing so many cool projects. Like, I want to hear all about it.
Projects-wise, I'm just really excited because this nonprofit that we started a couple of years ago just had... Well, I mean, we've had a few events, but COVID limited us because we're working with the vulnerable population. So we want to make sure that everybody's COVID safe. So we had to do a lot of stuff remote. And we had like one in-person event last year. And then we finally got to have another one this year. And alhamdulillah, it was like a smashing success. And get this. This is why I'm going to go into the PSA I'm about to go into. But I'm like literally I love your on PSAs. The way home, I get this phone call that I've been expecting.
Oh, no.
Because I was like, okay, but I had people in the car. I didn't want to be on the speaker. So I came home and the person had texted me instead because it didn't answer the phone. And basically the good news was that this particular nonprofit that, we've been trying to grow and just kept feeling sabotaged mostly by, COVID and other things that were out of our control. But subhanAllah, found out that we are the recipients of a very significant grant to help with caregiving services for this vulnerable population. And that makes my heart so happy, subhanAllah, because it's like I'm literally leaving the event, and I come home to this good news and I'm like, guys, blessings upon blessings. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is opening the path. Like just because things didn't happen on the timeline that we created, it's just like sabr, right? Just patience is the key. It wasn't the right time for us 2 years ago, or even last year, even 6 months ago. The time is now.
Yes.
So I'm just so looking forward to a 2023 where this nonprofit is able to serve its population, is able to do really amazing work. And to that end, just kind of going back on the pray, don't give up situation is there's only so much. And there was somebody, one of our supporters got up and said this as well yesterday. They're like, you can set up everything and you can do everything. whatever is within your human capability, you're going to organize, you're going to execute, you're going to get it all down. But ultimately, it's in Allah's hands, you know? So it's
100%.
like there's people work and there's Allah work. Like, he gonna do what he gonna do. No matter what you do or don't do, still means we have to do it, right? Because we are people who pray,
Right.
but we also
We
tired
have to do the
camel. We have
work.
to do the work.
Yes.
So do the work, but the results are with him. And the actual real execution is going to be on his timeline, on his schedule. So don't mess with God's work, because that's a losing battle, you know? So you do everything to the maximum capacity that you can possibly do. And I like to think that at this podcast, that's how we operate as well. Like, we do the best we can here on this podcast, and we broadcast into space because we can't see where this is going. We have no idea until a week later when we get our numbers back. And then we find out who Allah sent this to. And then, you know, when he's feeling really generous, then we hear back from where he sent us to, and they let us know, like, this made a difference in my life, or I'm having this other issue, or you can help me this other way, or I want to hear this. And that to us is God's work. And he does that for us. We do this for him. We also do this for our beautiful audience. And, you know, just any work that we do in the name of Allah. And we know that he's got us, and he's going to do the work to fulfill our intentions. And I'm just super excited about that. And I want to encourage everybody to do your work and let God do his. You know, he's got it. He knows what he's doing. So it's just all good. It's all going to work out. I'm excited. That's my PSA.
I love that. And I kind of have a feeling I can't wait till you can talk about this a little bit more in depth when everything gets
Inshallah.
signed on the dotted line, inshallah. So I'm super excited about that. And I can't believe it's already December.
I know.
Right? And we're at the end of 2022.
How did that happen?
And, you know, as a segue to what you were talking about, like, we kind of throw things out there. You know, we started literally at our kitchen table as a podcast. And I think at one point I was recording and doing the dishes.
You were doing it literally at the kitchen sink, yes.
I was. And she was like, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. I'm just talking. And she's like, no, stop it. And guess what, everybody? We hit 100,000 downloads.
Yep. I can give you an exact number, but you know.
We're not going to do that, but it's 0.01%. 0.01% of all podcasts actually go get that 100,000 number. So like I said, we were just like, if we can throw it out and like one person hears it, or it changes one person's lives, then honestly, it's been a therapeutic journey for me. I hope for you too, Uzma. So I really,
100%.
really thank everybody for doing that as we're wrapping up this amazing 2020. So, you know, keep it up. And for every episode you listen to, please share it with somebody different, because it's we're like the best podcast, in my opinion, that nobody knows about. And so I keep telling everybody, you know, pass it along, keep passing it along. Podcasting has really become like I always say it was like our side hustle project, something that we wanted to, we were passionate about. And literally it's our second full-time job. In addition to being moms, which was our first, and then our actual day jobs by the way, to pay for the podcast, because we're still working on doing that. And then the podcast itself. So, you know, it's super rewarding. So we're never going to complain. But we really want to have this be shared to a lot of other people and other podcasters. If you're out there, we love, especially Uzma, love sharing her expertise in all things, because she is like our producer extraordinaire, she and Joe, and I absolutely love it. But, you know, we're going to be talking about Muslim mental health. Okay. Because I was just dealing with my own mental health issues before we even started on this podcast, and I'm not quite ready to share that right now. So I'll share that a little bit later. But we're talking about a topic that is probably the most misunderstood topics in the mental health field. So I'm gonna read off of this, because I want to make sure everybody actually knows what this is about, because it's really misunderstood. We're going to talk a little bit about ADHD. And this is kind of something that has like, I just read an article today about like medication and ADHD and the impacts on boys versus girls. You know, it's really not about being able to pay attention or not pay attention. It's everybody thinks that, but that's not the case. It's a question we're going to ask our next guest, who, by the way, is one of our favorite people in the entire universe. So her name is Shehla Faizi, and she is a fellow podcaster. She produces and hosts the I Am Muslim, and that's okay because it is okay.
More than okay.
And her eldest, more than okay. And her eldest son is actually diagnosed with ADHD. So she's going to talk to us a little bit about the parenting journey and having a child that was, diagnosed with this, and, shedding a little bit of light for our parents. And also, she's one of the best podcast supporters in the world, and we love Shehla.
Welcome, Shehla.
Welcome, Shehla.
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me. I know I love y'all too.
Yes. We love it because she's like the first one to like something that we put out there on social media.
I know.
She's like usually
she's
maybe
watching.
the first or second one to comment. So like we always love.
And she tells us like the truth.
Oh yeah, this sounds really bad.
She's like, yeah, I don't like that. You need to go change that. And I'm like, I love that.
Yes.
Like most people are like, they get defensive, and we're like, we can't get better unless we get actual
feedback,
constructive criticism. So we really appreciate that, Shehla.
Absolutely. Well, Shehla, as you know, at the podcast, we like to kick it off by asking you about your mom's story and your momming philosophy, and we would love for you to get started there.
Oh gosh, that's interesting because I never ever thought of myself as like a mom. Even though I come from a mom who was incredibly maternal, and my sister was also incredibly maternal, but I never saw myself as somebody who genuinely enjoyed kids. I'm gonna be honest about this. I was like, I knew that I would probably have kids, but I was like, I don't know what I'd do with them. So quite frankly, because I don't think I have that like actual maternal instinct that I think a lot of women have. But I knew certain things that, and this was very specific. I was like, if I had boys, I would have, because you see a lot of these weird things that a lot of Desi parents do, like have favoritism towards boys. And I was like, I'm not going to do that with my boys. Like, and if I had girls, I would make them tough, because I was always like a tough little girl growing up. I was like, I'm going to make my girls tough, but I didn't have any specifics of what I was going to do with my kids. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me with my oldest one, the eldest, who has ADHD. And the thing is, he doesn't just have ADHD. And if I had to start anywhere, I think in terms of being a parent, he taught me the most about, because he was so hard. And I say this in air quotes because no baby wants to be hard on their parents. I don't care what anybody thinks, what any of the books say to discipline and all of these things. Especially I'm 40 now, we grew up with a certain methodologies when it came to parenting, letting them cry it out, or having them stand in the corner, timeouts. And again, I'm not necessarily putting anybody down for their parenting choices. It's just choices that over the years, I'm like, I can't ascribe to them anymore. So if I had to put in one word for my parenting philosophy, I'm like, I'm learning as I'm going. I have no idea what I'm doing. I literally have no idea what I'm doing.
Seat of my pants. Yep.
Yeah, man.
I love that. I think we all figure that out. It's probably because the learning curve is so steep with that first one. Mm-hmm. And then after that, because like I saw, it was so cute because I was at the airport last week. And there was this lady with a child who was a little bit younger than mine. I was traveling with my I was traveling with my daughter. And, it was funny because the little girl dropped something on the ground and the mom immediately picked it up and was like, put it out of her reach because she didn't want her sticking it back in her mouth. Mm-hmm. And my daughter's like, how come you just wipe it on your pants and like give it to us? And I was like, oh, you remember? I was like, well, you were number 3. And I realized by then that immunity is built by dirt.
Yeah.
So, I was like, that's just the difference between a first-time mom and a seasoned mother. And it's just something that you have to learn. I think everybody has to go through it. I think we all have to be the very neurotic first-time mom. Oh, yeah, and I have seen first-time moms who are not like that. They are actually very chill, but they're loads more mature than I was when I started. So, it's just beautiful. And I'm glad that you figured out what works for you. And if seat of the pants parenting works for you and your family, then by all means, I will I will give you the hook to hang your pants on. That is great.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
Oh, heck to the, I mean, that's like a book title, Seat of Your Pants
Oh my
Parenting.
gosh,
I like
yeah,
it.
Seat of My Pants
Let's
parenting.
pen it. Let's pen it.
do
We're gonna
We
it.
just
we're gonna pen
patented
that.
it. Patented
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Patented
patented it.
Copyrighted to
Patented it.
Uzma.
We copyrighted that.
And yeah,
okay?
here we are talking about writing a book. Okay, we're like, we can't even say patented
Yeah.
it,
Patented it.
and here we are talking
Patented
about that.
It's not
We have a
But I mean, but
patent
that's
on it.
it's fine.
Exactly. I'm sorry. See, this is what happens when you get Shehla in the room with
You
Uzma
get
and
two
myself. We
podcasters, we
like
can't do it.
digress. We get to, and it's like it's a hot mess. But you know what? Let's talk a little bit about ADHD. Like, so we're gonna get into the meat of it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you learned about your son getting ADHD, how it kind of presented itself to you, and tell a little bit about how, like, did you have any feelings? Because I always say moms have that momming instinct, right, where they're like, something's a little bit off. And when I say off, meaning you keep going. This happened with my daughter. I kept going and saying, I think she might have, nope, she's fine, nope, she's fine. And then I was like, I think she does. So it took me almost 16 years to convince people that my daughter had HD. And this was me as a mom. I'm saying, yeah, because why? It didn't actually impact her academically. So she wasn't red flagged. So how did you kind of come up to that? And could you share a little bit about what your thought process maybe was before, so that parents can kind of see themselves in your journey?
So with my eldest one, straight off the bat, the day he was born, nothing was ever like quote unquote normal. Okay. I'm gonna just put that out there. Bless him. I love him to bits. Okay. And I will shift the earth one way to the other for him and both my kids. And that's what I literally had to do. But the fact is, ever since he was born, he was not the regular baby. He was fussy to the max, and just there was no consoling him. So there was always something off about him. And I know it seems harsh to say that about your own child, but I've always relied on my instincts, and I relied on my instincts with my kids as well. There was always something off, and he was a not a I mean, terrible doesn't even begin it. He was a ridiculously bad sleeper. Like, just recently, I read a meme somewhere that if you put your child to sleep and after 2 hours, if you speak certain phrases to him, it'll go into their subconscious as a sort of a thought or a memory. I'm like, 2 hours later, do you know my child never slept for that long? He never slept in 2 hour stretches, ever. He only slept through the night after he joined kindergarten. Yeah. So there was never sleeping on this boy's menu, and he would not nap. Like, if he was napping, it was on me. And mashallah, he was a big boy. Like, I don't know how this boy did it, because he was barely eating in it or anything, but he grew like a string bean, and he was a big boy for any age. But he never slept well. He was always fussy. And the thing is, autism was always is something that is in my family. That was my first suspicion for him, because he was also very speech delayed. From the get-go, I had him tested, much to the I guess protests of my family. You do have to fight that battle, because everybody's like, oh, they'll outgrow it, oh, they'll outgrow it. But I was like, I'm not waiting that long, because I'd seen it with other family members, especially with their child with autism, that they were trying to wait it out. That's never a good idea. So I got him early intervention, and they did hearing tests, speech, and they did speech therapy for him. And alhamdulillah, after my second son was born, he did start speaking. So, but again, getting formal diagnoses for children is incredibly hard. And even at that time, I noticed that even with, me knowing that he was on the spectrum, even though I never got a formal diagnosis at that age, again, it's very hard. I was like, there's something more than just autism, because he can't sit still. He legitimately was never able to sit still, even when you're trying to feed him or anything. Like I could not get him to like sit in one spot. I always had to take him out and about and doing something. He was always the busy child. And but at that point I was trying to figure out one battle. I couldn't I tried to get him a diagnosis for autism, and again it was very hard the first time around. I did not They were like, no, he makes eye contact and hence he can't be autistic. Again, that's a very iffy thing. And I'm sorry, I'm venturing into autism, but let me get into the ADHD part as well. Again, he was not able to focus on a lot of things even after he started speaking. I mean, I knew he could hear. It's just that when I'm speaking to him, he was not able to focus on what I was saying or what I was telling him. So I knew that there was something other than just being on the spectrum. And at this age, he's probably around 5-ish or so. He just started kindergarten. And as a parent, you're trying to limit screen time, but this boy was legitimately, he loved being on like my phone. And I didn't discourage it, only because that was one of the ways he learned speech as well. I found out that he picked up speech better on the screen, as opposed to if we spoke to him. So, but he was more than a little obsessed. And I was like, there's something other than just him being on the spectrum. So I took him to the doctor and I was like, I I think he has ADHD. Can you test him for ADHD? And here's the tricky part about diagnosing little children. Little children, like, 5, 6 year olds, they do what is called a TOVA test. And the TOVA test is done on screen. So when you do a TOVA test on screen for a child who hyperfixates on the screen, they will automatically pass it. So when he did the TOVA test, he passed that TOVA test with flying colors. And doctor's like, no, your child does not have ADHD. I was like, dang it, this boy is beating the system. That's true.
Yeah.
Like, it's so hard when you have every single voice saying, no, you're wrong. He will outgrow it. And plus, when he started school, yes, it was hard for him. The transition was very hard for him. It's a change in schedule. Um, so uh, but he was doing decently academically. That's the other thing. Like, oh, you say that he's on the spectrum or he has ADHD. Why is he doing well in school, especially mathematics? And again, that's his other hyperfixation. This boy still is brilliant at maths.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things they test. I mean, that's the big thing, like maths,
But
English
it's
language.
like such a confounder that he's on the spectrum and his ADHD, because he's got all savant potential over
Yeah,
here, so
but
it's like one,
that's the success measure that we have for a lot of kids, and that's where it's wrong. You can't just, like, they're academically successful, leave them alone. No, that's the problem.
That's not enough. Yeah.
My child was struggling socially because he was on the spectrum, and plus he has ADHD as well. You can't get him to focus on the rules of a game if he's like, no, I'm a squirrel out of this one. I don't want to sit here because it's too boring for me now. So fast forward, and my diagnosis for my son is pretty recent. Again, I had to fight for both his autism diagnosis and his ADHD diagnosis. First time he passed both tests, being on the spectrum and having ADHD. Second time, I took him to a neuropsychologist, and if anybody knows like how difficult it is, a lot of times you do have to pay out of pocket for these things. So he did finally get his diagnosis of being atypical on the autism spectrum, but he is on the spectrum. And then I was like, okay, I can get him help for this if he needs it socially, because again, he's not understanding a lot of social rules and he's behind socially. But with ADHD, again, he's doing very well academically, but at home, he's like a mess. And I say this in the most loving way possible as a mom, but at home, he's unable to sit down. He's unable to focus on simple instructions. Like if I told him, please go wash wash your face and change your clothes. He'll be up, and then you'd be like, maybe wash his face, but he'll forget to change his clothes. So I'm having to repeat the same instructions multiple times. And the thing is, it's cute as a kid for the rest of the family, but as they get older, there's people then starting to criticize him, like, why can't you do this right? I just gave you a simple instruction. Why are you this way? Why are you that way? That and that's the thing. Then you're also trying to help him, but you're also fighting other people and being like, you can't criticize him for something that he can't help. And it's hard to explain to other people that he does ADHD because, again, in the Desi Muslim community, whatever you want to call it, this is not known. We have lots of other labels that we put on children who do suffer from ADHD, that they're maybe like slow, or they're just goofy, or any number of terms. But this is a legitimate, like a neurological condition that he had. So anyway, the thing is, when the pandemic came, and that's where like the true test of things sort of came in. Children were put under enormous amounts of pressure, especially when their entire school schedules changed. Neurotypical kids were struggling. I had my ADHD child and my neurotypical child both at home, and both were like doing so so. But for my older one, especially, um, if anybody who knows, who has a child with ADHD, who has ADHD themselves, structure is key for them to succeed. It's not just about like giving them a set of instructions, because they can't follow those instructions half the time. If the structure is taken away, especially, they struggle really bad. And that's what we saw for my older one, that even though he had the assignments, he's like, I can't, and he would give up. Like even the smallest things, that if he had to read a paragraph and then answer questions, just because everything had shifted, he just shut down, and his grades suffered. And then, all the naysayers like, oh, there is a problem. I'm like, no kidding. Like, I've been saying this for the past 11 years. And
we used to say no duh back in the day, right? Like, and as a mom, I'm
Back
like
in the
totally
day.
aging myself,
I think I said yesterday.
back in the day, I still say it. But and I'm not trying to interrupt you,
No.
Shehla, because I totally get it, because it sounds like your journey as a mom, you had your mom instincts and you had to fight to advocate for your child. So you're fighting to advocate for your child in the school system, which is its own thing, and you're also trying to fight to advocate for him within your own family structure.
Right.
Plus the healthcare system.
And what's happened, plus the healthcare system, because like you said, right, like you're paying out of pocket until you get a diagnosis, but you can't get a diagnosis until you pay out of pocket. And we're not talking about chump change.
No.
We're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars for people. So so having, once you've got that diagnosis, and now, and everyone thinks it's a, like you call them, neurodivergent, right? I say to my kids, I have two that are one that's severe and one that has it. I call it their superpower, because ADHD kids have such amazing potential. They can think, to your point, they can micro focus when they want to. They have so much creativity. So what do you, as somebody, like as a mom that's kind of going into this and they're like a little bit nervous, and we're talking about a little bit about the quote unquote negative parts of the journey. What were some of the things that you found positive once you got that diagnosis? And like I always say, name it to tame it. So what was something that you could say to give hope to somebody that's kind of in the beginning parts of this process?
I don't know if I can say hope per se, but here's the thing, okay? As a parent, and this is something I firmly believe in now. Again, it's been through my parenting journey. You start off with a certain image that you have of what your children should be in your brain. For anybody who's struggling, not just with having their child like on the spectrum, or who have a child who has ADHD, it's something that you need to accept them for as they are. This is one of the biggest things that I've seen parents struggle with, that they can't accept their child as they are. yeah, they have ADHD. They may be on the spectrum or any number of things, okay? But they have been sent to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as they are, and we are required to accept them as they are. It's not easy. But the fact is, we make it more difficult on ourselves when we're like, oh no, but my child needs to be part of the basketball team or the football team or needs to have XYZ number of friends. These are all expectations that are unfair to any child, whether they're neurodivergent or not. If I had to give one piece of advice, it's that please take your child as they are. That was a difficult lesson for me to learn because, again, you do comparison as a parent. I'm not proud of it, but you do. You do comparisons as a parent, but that, again, is not fair to your child. With a child with ADHD, they can't help themselves when they can't sit still or they do not enjoy things that other kids enjoy. My kid never enjoyed hide and seek. I tried it. It's like I'm bored of it. 2 seconds later, okay, like you can't expect, but he loves logic games. I could play Connect Four with that kid for hours because it's a logic based game and he loves it. And that's where you got to meet them. You got to meet them where they are. And for me, you know, I've always been I love my son as he is. He's developed different hyperfixations over the years. There was a time when he could create incredibly complex Lego sets, things that were for like 12, 13, 14 years old. And he was doing it at 8, 9 years old, doing them and completing them on their own, on his own. I mean, that was incredible. That is his powerful skill set. But you do, again, I didn't know this at that time because for me, I was trying to figure out what it is. The doctor had already said, no, he doesn't have ADHD because he's passed the TOVA test. But I got a lot of my information from my other friends who had children with ADHD or who were diagnosed with ADHD themselves. And slowly you're connecting the dots. He was like, I think I need to push this harder. And I did this not just so, and this is the other fear that a lot of they see Muslim parents have, but they'll put a label on my child. It's not just that you want a label on your child. You need to figure out how to help them. My children, both of them, go to Islamic school. Okay. And there was a time when it was written in their, I guess, formal contract that they don't provide any special needs services. That includes, you know, special services for autism or somebody on the ADHD spectrum. A lot of parents have to lie to get their kids, including me, that, you know, they don't have a diagnosis or they're okay, you know, because if for any reason they feel that they would have to provide extra services, they might not accept admission. So that is another one of those hindrances that parents face socially. That if I tell the truth, will I be able to provide the same opportunities as I would for a neurotypical child or my own neurotypical child? It's very difficult. Now they do provide special services, but this is 5 years into my child being in Islamic school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been an evolution process over there as well. They do provide services, and I went through their services to after his ADHD diagnosis, so they may be able to provide some extra services if he needs it, including extra time to finish assignments, because that's one of the things that children with ADHD struggle with, staying focused on task. And especially after the pandemic, it's one of those things that sort of popped out for him, that he could not stay on task on even the simplest of things. It's just that he is the first roadblock he would meet, he would give up. And again, it's one of those things you do have to sit down and sort of work with your child. And again, it's a strenuous process, but if you really love your child, you will do it. You will be there to help them through those roadblocks that they feel are roadblocks. For any other child, it's not a roadblock because, you know, it's a simple thing. Let's try another way to do it. But that's not how it works with ADHD. Yeah. They generally have a very fixed way of how things are supposed to work out. If it doesn't work that way, everything shuts down.
Oh, yeah.
That's a problem.
I feel like everybody has one of those kids. Like now I feel like I want to get my anxious one tested. I just thought it was a sign of his anxiety, but I never really considered ADHD for him because he is laser focused on a task. And
But
it's like
that's a hyperfixation.
yeah,
That's what I learned.
yeah.
That's a
Oh,
hyperfixation.
this may
That's
be
another
helping you
character.
more than you know, my friend.
Yeah. So
What you did mention that makes me really happy is that Islamic schools are now offering assistance for kids with any kind of needs. One
it's
what?
only one.
It's
Only
only
one
one.
in
Oh, yes.
one in
Because
the
when I was
entire city.
teaching in Islamic school many, many years ago, before I left it for medical school, I actually did tell parents whose children had learning disabilities and I wasn't a formal teacher. I had an emergency teaching certification, but I could tell. I was like, this child needs more than I can give her. Or this child needs more than I could give him. And when the parents were like, hey, so what do you think about placing my child for next year? I was like, I really think your kid needs to go to public school to get the additional services and support that they need. And it was hard to convince these parents because they didn't
It's
want,
ridiculously
not
hard.
everybody wanted to hear
No,
that
no.
my kid, and I wasn't saying your kid can't do it. I said your kid just needs more support that you're already paying for in like buku taxes. So go do that, save your tuition, bring them back later. I understand that a lot of parents want their kids to have the advantages of Islamic school, but I want to make sure that it's not at the expense of their emotional social health, their emotional intelligence, because that I think is the hardest thing to teach, because especially if you're coming in with any kind of I don't know. I don't want to say cards stacked against you. I think just like you said, the way Allah created you, like maybe you weren't born with all of the social skills. And that's something that you're going to have to learn, and it can be taught in some situations. It can be remediated, but it takes time and it takes patience with the parents. And I appreciate you reminding the parents that there may be stigma attached to it, but it's completely unfounded. There's no reason, and labels. I'm also anti-labels. But if it gets your kid the additional help that they need, whether it's insurance backed or medical establishment backed, I think that it's really important to get those labels.
Here's the other thing, and I will put this out there. For you to get your child and services through school, you need a formal diagnosis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been pushing for this since this child was born, and again, I had to jump through so many hurdles you would not believe. For the first time, when I needed to get him a diagnosis for his autism, I had to wait 1.5 years before I even got a space to get him a formal
neuropsych
diagnosis.
Testing, it's very long waits. Yeah.
And for any sort of these neurological testing for children, there's a really long waiting period. I had all of these things because I had been fighting ever since this boy was born. And I could present it to the school board and those who were giving him the diagnosis. And they're like, oh, you've already done the hard work. It's like, yeah, I had to work hard for a really long time.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And then once you get diagnosed, right? Like to your point, it takes years sometimes. Then after that, if in order to get the services and qualify for the services, you have to have what's called like an IEP meeting with the school, right? It's which IEP, for people that don't know, is an individual education plan. And by the way, many people can, and then you have to go in front of a board group of people. You have to present it even once you've been formally diagnosed, and then they have to accept the accommodations that the psychologist has suggested. And the school board has a right to say no if they don't want to do that.
Or if they're not equipped to provide it.
If they're not
but
equipped.
Legally,
and so
they have to get the equipment to provide it.
Yes, exactly. Or provide you an alternative, which for a lot of schools, they'll say, we can't do this, but here's another school that can. So that's the unfortunate thing. So it's not an easy process. So to your point, like Uzma said, it was like the cards are stacked against you, and which is great because you were able to read those cards, right, as his mom. And so part of the thing too is dealing with, to your point, the family stigma. So especially within our particular subgroup
Mhm.
within this,
The Muslim
within the Muslim
community.
world. So because again, they sweep everything under the rug. So how did you deal with that piece? Because I feel like part of the issue for people in even trying to get the diagnosis is they're fearful of what their family is going to say. So they don't want to do that. So how did you handle that? And two, what would you suggest to somebody kind of going through that?
Information is your best friend, okay? And having like a very thick skin about certain things. I've always been that way, that I like, even if like some I was going against something, it bothered me very little because what other people thought mattered very little to me. And that's not easy, okay? I'm not saying it's easy for people, but again, if you really love your child, that's the bottom line to this. You will be ready to fight those battles. I'm not saying those battles are easy. None at all. Because as moms, we're not fighting one battle. Okay? We're fighting battles over, oh,
Whack-a-mole.
what, why isn't dinner ready? Or
Muslim
why is the
social
house
whack-a-mole.
messy? Blah, blah, blah. I could 10 bajillion things that could be there. You're fighting many battles, and it's very tiring. But information is your best friend. Do read up, do research. And again, it's not a matter of just Googling something and it's like, oh, it's like, please don't go on WebMD with fraud
Please
for any
don't.
of this.
Thank
So
you for
don't
saying
do
that.
that. But the thing is, your instincts as a mom are rarely ever wrong because, A, as a mom, you don't want anything wrong with your child, okay? But if you've got your instinct that keeps pushing at you that there's something off, there's a good chance there is, okay? Meet other people, talk to other people. And here's the thing, when I started off with my eldest child, I joined a Facebook group, which was the high needs support group for high needs children. And those were all the babies that were not sleeping at night and hyper fussy. Okay. So again, this is a very broad explanation, and not all the babies were as fussy as my kid. And then it started slowly trickling down with moms with their kids as they got older. They're like, "Oh, my child has an autism diagnosis at this age, or they have an ADHD diagnosis, and they exhibit certain symptoms." And you're like, "Oh wow, my child is also checking up a lot of these boxes. Maybe there's a time that I should get a diagnosis or even just talk to the doctor that, I suspect XYZ." And here's the thing, what's the worst that's going to happen? The worst that's going to happen? You were wrong. Hooray for that, that you were wrong, that, yeah, your child does not have ADHD. Okay. There is no wrong situation in any of this. A, if your child needs the help, you will get the help for your child. And B, if you are wrong, hey, like, here goes another day. My kid's okay. Alhamdulillah. I'm going with that.
I think as somebody whose kid did end up getting a diagnosis too, the fear is actually that you're right, I think, for a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of parents. And it
Oh, yeah.
like that fear, and then having that fear confirmed at the doctor's office or the psychologist's office, that's it's almost like the ground goes out from underneath you, because like you said, we have these expectations for our children. We want them to be quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
And I just want to assure everybody that the ground is always there.
It's
It
always
never
there.
went anywhere.
You know what the real problem is, Usman? We've talked about this before. It's not that your child has a diagnosis. Could be any diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
literally any diagnosis. The problem is that socially, we are not supporting parents and children who need help.
Yeah.
Any kind
100%.
of help. Legitimately,
100%.
any kind of help. That's a social problem.
So
Not
on
a
that
problem.
note,
Yeah.
what I want to know is, because early on, and I was a mother at this point, and I was not very, what's the word, nice to a kid with ADHD in my community, because I didn't know what he had. Because again, now everybody knows
Right.
what he has. And it wasn't, he didn't have ADHD, but he did have a diagnosis. And at the time, I didn't know. It wasn't verbalized. To this day, we all now know, but nobody still gives it a name. His mom is talking about it more now, alhamdulillah. But I was not supportive early on, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to know what to do, but I am a reformed mom judger, and I want to know, as do all of our audience members who may still be mom judgers, please help us understand the kind of social support that I needed to offer that kid's mom back then, 15 years ago, that I know now, but I didn't know at that time.
I think if there was one thing that I wish I had when I was younger, my baby was younger, that you do need more people around you to just be able to give you a break. In a sense that now that especially I do see other parents with other little babies who are more than likely who have ADHD. What I do is that I take their babies from them. Mm-hmm. And I know how to put an ADHD baby to sleep. Okay? I will do that for them. I will take them out. I will distract their little babies and just so to give their moms a break. I wish I had that. I was all alone trying to figure out a lot of difficult things. And that's the worst thing that I feel is that exists is that, yeah, you already have a child that you're struggling to parent. Legitimately, you're struggling to parent that child. And you don't get a break either. More than likely, you're hearing a lot of different things from your own family members as well. If you see a mom that's struggling with a child that is probably running around and not sitting in place, especially in the masjids, and everybody's like, "Shh, don't sit. Have your child sit down. Go here, go there."
Do not shush that woman.
Yeah,
do not shush her and her child.
Yeah, the thing is, you distract the little kid. I've done that so many times. Like, show them something on your phone, or if the parent allows it, give them some candy. Like for that time period, something that'll keep the little baby busy or the little toddler busy. And you'd be surprised how grateful that parent is. And again, here's the other thing. For not every child running around in the masjid screaming their lungs out has ADHD. I'm gonna preface that as well, okay?
And we're not going to call them ADHD babies. We're going to call them high needs babies because we can't test them.
High needs babies, or just that their parents are not paying attention. You can tell the difference of a parent of a child with ADHD or who has a child on the spectrum. They're always anxious because they know the kind of destruction that the kid does at home. Like, they know they're anxious. They're anxious to even bring their child to the masjid. They're so very anxious because they want their child to be a part of the masjid. But if you've got a dozen other aunties and uncles shushing you, then that's not helping anybody,
Hey, Salam Sadaf, we're about to wrap up. Just 1 second. Let me figure out how to mute ya. I'm glad you found us, though. All right. We have one final question because I really needed to know on medication. Mm-hmm. I'm interested. There's a lot of conversation about, medications for ADHD, whether they're halal or haram in our community. So what does that conversation look like for you guys?
So for me, particularly, I've trying to do the therapy route first before I get into medication. Again, from experiences from other moms, I know that different children respond differently to ADHD medication. Some children will outright say that they don't like how it makes them feel.
Right.
And if my son says that, I would completely respect it and take him off the medication. But if it genuinely helps my son, I would definitely 100% go for medication as well if just therapy is not helping him enough. And the bottom line is, what I mean by helping him is not to bring him to normal. That's never going to happen. That's one acceptance that parents need to have. He will always have ADHD. But how can I help him navigate life in the best way possible? That's the end result for me.
I appreciate that answer. I think that is an excellent answer, in fact, because I was afraid that you weren't going to pursue medications. No. But again, whatever helps my kid, like you said, if I'm willing to turn the world on its axis, then medication is not a big deal. And as long as it's serving the child and, you know, you're not going to get 100%, but if your child is feeling results and you're feeling results, then that's the most important thing. So I love it. And I think that is awesome. Very heavy conversation today, but I loved it. I learned so much, and I have something to talk to my doctor about now. So thank you so much for enlightening me, because a dozen light bulbs went off in my head as you were talking. And now I think I understand one of my children a little bit better than I did, because I actually had to negotiate with him for after school today. Because, of course, last night at 11 p.m. is when he wanted to clean the fish tank, and it had to be done right then. So it took quite a bit of convincing to say, I really don't feel like fixing like fish poop right now. Like, can we do it after school tomorrow? So I know I will be held under a knife until after school when that fish tank is done. So thank you for that. But on a happier, lighter note, I thought we would get into our rapid fire segment, which, if you don't remember, is first thing that's top of mind. We want to know, to try to get to know you better. And there's 90 seconds on the clock. There is no right answer except exactly what you feel. So we're going to kick it off with, what book are you reading right now?
I am reading The Union right now.
The Union. Okay, we're going to get that up on our show notes so people can look that up. Is that fiction?
It's fiction dystopian.
Oh, that's right. This is going to be a hard read for me because I don't like dystopia, but I will give you the benefit of the doubt. You've never steered me wrong yet. So.
Yeah.
Let's see. What's one thing that is the ugliest thing you've ever seen? Ugly is relative.
Ugly is relative. Ooh, the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Gosh, that's hard.
It's usually something on National Geographic.
Those
Those like animal shows that I watched as a kid.
I don't know, man. Probably something my cat barfed up last week.
That's funny. Okay. What is your favorite beverage in a can?
Oh, Coke. And
Coke.
It has to be original Coke. Okay,
original
please.
Coke. Yes.
Nobody give me Diet
Absolutely.
or Coke Zero.
Coke Zero. I know. People tell me it tastes the same, and I'm like, you don't know Coke.
No,
what habit holds you back the most?
Oh gosh. Probably procrastination.
I know. I was going to say. For me too.
Yeah, man. It's terrible, but yeah.
All right. Your impulse buy at grocery checkout.
Impulse buy. Can I call it impulse buy on Amazon? Because I barely shop in stores.
Okay, it doesn't have to be the grocery
impulse
store.
buy on Amazon is probably cute stationery. I don't know if you can see me. Like, I got like these
You like
teeny tiny magnet cats, and I got these teeny tiny cat pens. It's ridiculous.
Anything cat.
Anything
I love
cat.
it.
That's my impulse buy.
Okay. Well, I will not fault you for that. I appreciate you sharing those things on Rapid Fire. You actually played it the most correctly that we've had in a long time. It's like, yay, right off the top of our head. I love it. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for enlightening us today about ADHD. And I really, really love, especially how much you addressed how we can better address the social, I think we've called it stigma up until now, but let's just call it the social like hangups that we have for no good reason, hang them up permanently. Yeah. So that'll be good. Thank you so much. We can't wait to have you back, Shehla. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here.
This episode is sponsored by Guidance Residential. Join Guidance Residential this November 9th for their consumer webinar, The Benefits of Islamic Home Financing, where you can find out best practices and tips on how to make the home buying experience smooth and easy for you and your community. Topics covered include the benefits of homeownership, understanding riba and today's lending practices, the differences between the Sharia way and the conventional way, how to prepare your finances and mistakes to avoid, what to expect during the home buying and searching process, and Q&A for the first-time home buyer. Share this event with your networks and register for limited seats at www.guidanceresidential.com.